You will not leave this room until every last page is signed. My father didn't raise his voice. He never had to. Malcolm Ashford spoke the way a man speaks when he spent 40 years believing the world owed him silence whenever he opened his mouth. The dining room smelled of roasted lamb and dried lavender, but underneath all of it was something sharper, something chemical. Like the air before a thunderstorm, charged and waiting. Thanksgiving at the Ashford house was never about gratitude. It was about inventory. Who had earned their seat, who hadn't? And this year the seat they wanted me to earn came with a price tag. My mother, Judith, sat at the far end of the table, her fingers wrapped around a glass of Sancerre she hadn't touched. She was watching me the way a surgeon watches a patient before the first cut. Calm. Clinical. Already past the part where empathy lives. Across from her, my younger sister Tessa leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, a smile tugging at the corner of her mouth like she was watching the final scene of a movie she'd already seen twice. And beside Tessa, her husband Grant, the man who married into this family like a pilot fish attaching itself to a shark. He had a legal pad in front of him, a Mont Blanc pen resting on top, and the quiet confidence of someone who had drafted the trap I was sitting in. Here's what they wanted. My grandmother, Mabel Ashford, had left me the sole beneficiary of a 40-acre parcel of land on the outskirts of Savannah. Not my father. Not Tessa. Me. She'd done it quietly, through a separate will filed with her own attorney, because she knew exactly what her son would do if he found out. She was right. The document in front of me was a quitclaim deed. One signature and the land would transfer to a trust controlled by my father. They had it drawn up by Grant's firm, notarized, witnessed the whole production. All it needed was my hand. I picked up the pen. Tessa shifted in her seat. My mother exhaled. My father's jaw unclenched by a millimeter, which for him was practically a standing ovation. They thought I was folding. They thought I was still the girl who dropped out of the Rhode Island School of Design to chase a dream they never understood. The girl who ate ramen in a studio apartment in Brooklyn while they vacationed in Turks and Caicos. The girl who couldn't hold down a real job, couldn't find a real man, couldn't produce a single thing of value in their eyes. I set the pen down. I'm not signing this. The silence hit like a dropped piano. 4 seconds of absolute nothing. Then my father spoke. If you don't sign that deed, you are not my daughter. You are a stranger sitting at my table, and I will have you removed from this property tonight. I didn't blink. I reached into my bag, a battered canvas tote they'd mocked me for carrying, and pulled out a manila folder. I slid it across the polished mahogany. It came to rest against the gravy boat. That's not my signature, I said. That's a notice of default. Before I tell you what happened next and why there were federal agents in the driveway within the hour, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to see how far this story reaches. And have you ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to love you? Drop it in the comments, because tonight the tables turn. My father opened the folder like it might bite him. I watched his eyes move across the first page, left to right, then back to the left, then right again, slower this time, like a man reading his own obituary. The document was a foreclosure filing, but the lender listed wasn't a bank. It was Palladian Holdings, LLC, my company. You see, Dad, I said, folding my hands on the table. 6 years ago, while you were telling your golf buddies that your oldest daughter was a failed painter selling watercolors at flea markets, I was building a real estate development firm, Palladian Holdings. We specialize in commercial acquisitions, mixed-use developments, and distressed asset recovery. Last year, we cleared $1.9 billion in revenue. Tessa laughed. It was a sharp, brittle sound. You? A billion-dollar company? You couldn't even pay your phone bill last Christmas. Check your inbox, Tessa. She rolled her eyes but pulled out her phone. I counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. Her face changed on 5. The color drained out of it like someone had pulled a plug. Palladian acquired your husband's law firm this morning, I said, not breaking eye contact with my father. It was a distressed acquisition. Turns out Grant's been running a client trust account like a personal checking account. Commingling funds, unauthorized withdrawals, the works. Our forensic auditors found it in less than 72 hours. He's been disbarred effective Monday, and the state bar is filing criminal charges. Grant shot out of his chair. That's a lie. That's a damn lie. You can't just sit down, Grant. I said it the way my father used to say it to me, flat. Final. He sat. My mother set her wineglass down with a trembling hand. Sienna, stop this. This is Thanksgiving. This is family. No, I said, this is a leveraged buyout. And you're all underwater. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the Savannah oaks were draped in Spanish moss, their branches scratching against the evening sky like skeletal fingers. This house, this 12,000 square foot monument to my father's ego, sat on land owned by a holding company. A holding company whose majority shareholder, as of 9 days ago, was Palladian Holdings. This property, I said, turning back to face them, operates under a corporate tenancy agreement. Occupancy is contingent on active employment within the parent company's subsidiaries. Dad, you were terminated from your position at Ashford Capital Management 6 hours ago when I completed the acquisition. Mum, your consulting contract with the foundation was dissolved at the same time. Tessa, Grant, your firm no longer exists. None of you have standing to be here. You are, legally speaking, trespassing. The room looked like a photograph. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. My father's face had gone from red to grey, the kind of grey that belongs on concrete, not skin. My mother's composure had cracked, and beneath it was something raw and desperate. Tessa was gripping Grant's arm so hard her knuckles were white. Grant himself looked like a man who had just realized the floor beneath him was made of glass. You have 15 minutes to collect your personal belongings, I said, checking my watch. A property management team is on standby to inventory corporate assets. I'd advise against taking anything that doesn't belong to you. I walked toward the front door, my heels clicking against the hardwood in a rhythm that felt like a heartbeat. I felt it then, the hot, electric surge of victory. Years of humiliation, years of being the family joke. The spare daughter, the one they kept around to make Tessa look brighter by comparison. All of it was ending tonight. I reached for the door handle. And that's when I realized I hadn't won anything yet. A hand caught my wrist. Not gently. Grant spun me around, his face inches from mine, his breath smelling of bourbon and desperation. You're not walking out of here, he said, his voice low and controlled in a way that made my skin crawl. You think you can blow up our lives and just leave? My father appeared behind him. The grey was gone. In its place was the Malcolm Ashford I grew up fearing, the one who used silence like a weapon and rage like a currency. He closed the front door, locked it. The deadbolt clicked into place with a sound that echoed through the foyer like a gunshot. Tessa, my father said without turning around, call it in. My sister's face shifted. The shock was gone, replaced by something rehearsed, something practiced. She pulled out her phone and dialed. Her hand wasn't shaking anymore. And then my mother began to scream. My ring, she shrieked, clutching her right hand. The diamond ring! Mabel's ring! It's gone! She whipped around to face me, her eyes wide with a terror so perfectly calibrated it belonged on a stage. She took it. I saw her reach into the jewelry case in the hallway when she came in. She stole Mabel's ring. The ring in question was a 4-carat emerald-cut diamond set in platinum. My grandmother's engagement ring, insured for $680,000. It was the one piece of jewelry my mother hadn't pawned during my father's last financial crisis. I stared at them. The sheer choreography of it was almost impressive. Tessa was already on the phone, her voice trembling with manufactured distress. Yes, officer, my sister. She stole a family heirloom. We have her detained. Please hurry. Grant stepped in front of me, his arms crossed. Grand larceny, he said, his voice smooth and lawyerly despite the fact that he was, as of 6 hours ago, no longer a lawyer. Theft of property valued over $500,000. In Georgia, that's a felony, 1 to 20 years. He paused, letting that land. Unless, he continued, you sign the deed, and transfer Palladian's acquisition rights back to your father. We can make this go away. We're family, after all." It clicked, all of it. This wasn't improvised. They hadn't panicked when I pulled out the foreclosure notice. They had anticipated it. Maybe not the specifics, but they had known I might fight back, and they had prepared a contingency. Invite me to Thanksgiving. Pressure me to sign. If I refused, if I escalated, frame me. Either I surrendered my inheritance, or I went to prison while they collected insurance on a ring they'd staged as stolen. My mother moved before I could react. She grabbed the lapel of my jacket, yanked it open, and shoved her hand into the inside pocket. I tried to twist away, but Grant pinned my arms. I felt her fingers close around something, then withdraw. She held up her hand. A diamond ring glittered between her fingers, catching the chandelier light. "Found it," she whispered, turning to Grant with tears streaming down her face. She had it on her. She stole Mabel's legacy. I looked at my mother's face. There was no guilt there, no hesitation, just the smooth, practiced expression of a woman who had learned long ago that her daughters were not people, they were instruments, tools to be used, discarded, and blamed. And standing there, pinned in my own family's foyer, watching my mother frame me for a crime she had manufactured, I felt something shift. Not break. Shift. Like tectonic plates settling into a new configuration. Because I had been here before. I was 21, 3 months before I left for New York. I was sitting in the kitchen of the house we'd had before this one, the smaller one in Midtown Atlanta, before my father's first big deal. My mother was crying at the table, telling me she needed surgery. Something with her back, she said. The insurance wouldn't cover it. She needed $8,000. I didn't have $8,000. What I had was a savings account I'd been feeding since I was 16, babysitting money, birthday checks from Grandma Mabel, tips from the coffee shop on Peachtree. It was my escape fund, my art school fund, my future. But she was my mother, and she was in pain. I drove to the bank and withdrew everything, handed her a cashier's check. She hugged me so tight I thought my ribs would crack, called me her angel, her lifeline, her brave, beautiful girl. 2 weeks later, I came home early from a closing shift. The front door was open. Music was playing. I walked into the living room and found Tessa spinning in front of the mirror in a beaded cocktail dress, tag still on. My mother was on the couch, clapping. "You look like a movie star, darling," she said. "Worth every cent." The receipt was on the coffee table. A boutique on West Paces Ferry. $7,200, plus alterations, plus shoes. When I confronted her, she didn't apologize. She looked at me with that flat, appraising stare, the one that made me feel like a piece of furniture being evaluated for resale value, and said, "Don't be dramatic, Sienna. Your sister has a cotillion. You can always make more money." They taught me something that day. They taught me that love, in this family, was a transaction, and I was always on the losing end of the ledger. But the woman standing in that foyer 14 years later was not the girl who emptied her bank account for a mother who spent it on a dress. I was the CEO of a company that moved more capital in a quarter than my father had touched in his entire career, and I knew exactly how to handle a hostile takeover. "Mum," I said, my voice cutting through her performance like a scalpel, "you're going to frame your own daughter for a felony. $680,000 in insurance fraud and a false police report. Just to keep this house." Judith stopped crying. Instantly. Like someone had turned off a faucet. She lowered the ring and looked at me with those flat, dead eyes I remembered from the kitchen. "You owe us, Sienna. We raised you. We fed you. We gave you every opportunity and you threw it away to finger paint. If you can't contribute to this family like Tessa does, then the least you can do is step aside. We need the insurance payout, and we need you gone before you embarrass us in front of the Hartwell trustees next month." There it was, stripped of pretense. I wasn't a daughter, I was a liability on a balance sheet, and they were writing me off. "You think I owe you my life?" I asked. My father stepped forward. "You owe us everything," he growled, "and you will pay." "Actually," I said, "the debt's been settled. In full." Red and blue lights swept across the front windows. Tessa smiled. The cavalry, she said, smoothing her hair. The doorbell rang. Grant opened it with a flourish. Officers, in here. We've caught a thief. Deputy Holt walked in, a heavy-set man with a grey moustache and the easy confidence of someone who'd been the local law for 20 years. He looked around the room, clocking each face. Malcolm, he said with a nod. What we got? My father launched into his rehearsed monologue. My daughter stole my wife's diamond ring, Mabel's heirloom. We found it on her person. She's been unstable for years. Please, we just want to handle this properly. Holt turned to me. That true? The ring was planted, I said calmly. And if you arrest me, you'll be interfering with a federal investigation. Holt snorted. Federal? Right. Mom, I'm gonna need you to come with me. Grant stepped forward, holding up his phone. He had a video. Grainy, shot from a security camera angle. It showed a woman in a jacket identical to mine, reaching into a jewelry case in the hallway. A deep fake. Crude, but convincing enough for a county deputy on a Thursday night. There's your evidence, Grant said smugly. Open and shut. Holt reached for his handcuffs. Ma'am, turn around. The metal was cold against my wrists. I let it happen. I stood still as Holt clicked the cuffs shut, as my mother sobbed theatrically into a handkerchief, as my father placed a hand on Tessa's shoulder in a gesture of fatherly comfort, so practiced it made my stomach turn. Grant leaned in close. That little recording device you're probably wearing, he whispered. It won't matter. Holt's been on your father's payroll since the Reagan administration. Whatever you've got disappears tonight. And that video of you stealing the ring, that goes everywhere. You're done. My father nodded. Get her out of here, he said, and make sure the Hartwell people hear about this. I want her name buried. They glowed. All four of them, radiant with victory, standing in the warm light of the chandelier like a portrait of a family that had just successfully excised a tumor. I smiled. You checked the driveway, I said, but you didn't check the sky. Holt frowned. What? The sound hit 3 seconds later. A deep, rhythmic thudding that rattled the window panes and sent the crystal decanter on the sideboard skittering toward the edge. The front door blew open. Snow and dead leaves swirled into the foyer. Floodlights cut through the darkness outside like surgical beams. FBI, federal agents, everyone on the ground, now. Holt dropped to his knees so fast his gun belt clattered against the tile. Grant stumbled backward into the wall. My mother screamed, a real scream this time, not the rehearsed kind. My father stood frozen, his mouth open, his eyes tracking the black-jacketed agents pouring through the door with the slow, disbelieving comprehension of a man watching his empire collapse in real time. An agent approached me. Miss Merce. Ashford. Are you all right? Just detained, I said. He removed the handcuffs. I stepped forward, rubbing my wrists. I picked up the ring from where my mother had set it on the hall table. I held it up to the light. Then I dropped it on the marble floor. It shattered. 4-carat diamonds don't shatter, I said, looking at my mother. Glass does. You sold Grandma Mabel's real ring 8 months ago to cover Dad's margin call on his brokerage account. I know because I bought it back at auction in March. It's sitting in a vault in Zurich right now, where none of you will ever touch it. My mother's face went white. I reached into my bag and pulled out a bill of sale. Sotheby's letterhead. Authenticated provenance. My grandmother's ring, purchased by Palladian Holdings for $412,000. You filed a false police report, I said, turning to my father. You conspired with a local law enforcement officer to unlawfully detain a private citizen. You fabricated digital evidence. You attempted insurance fraud on a piece of jewelry you no longer own. And you did all of it while being recorded by a military-grade encrypted transmission system that has been uploading every word of this conversation to a federal server since I walked through your front door. Grant's knees buckled. He actually sat down on the floor, right there in the foyer, his designer suit crumpling against the tile. The agent stepped forward. We have the full audio, he confirmed. Conspiracy to commit fraud, false imprisonment, filing a false police report, and attempted extortion of a federal contractor. He looked at Holt, who was still on his knees. And you, aiding and abetting. Obstruction. My father found his voice. Sienna, he said, and for the first time in my life, I heard something in it that wasn't authority or contempt. It was fear. Sienna, please. We're your family. We can work this out. I'll sign whatever you want. Just call them off. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had told me, at 17, that art was a hobby for people who couldn't do real work. The man who had refused to come to my first gallery showing but flew to Tess's sorority formal. The man who had taken my grandmother's love for me, the one pure thing I had, and tried to convert it into a line item on his balance sheet. I felt nothing. This isn't revenge, I said. This is an audit, and you failed. I turned to the agent. They're all yours. They led them out one at a time. My father first, his wrists cuffed behind his back, his face the color of old newspaper. Then my mother, her mascara running in black rivers down her cheeks, her mouth opening and closing without sound. Then Tessa, who screamed my name once, twice, 3 times, each one more desperate than the last, before an agent guided her into the back of a sedan. Then Grant, who said nothing at all, just walked with the shuffling gait of a man who already knew what a prison cell looked like from the inside. And finally, Holt, who couldn't meet anyone's eyes. I stood on the porch and watched the taillights disappear down the long, tree-lined driveway. The Spanish moss swayed in the November wind. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell was ringing, marking the hour. My phone buzzed. It was my COO. "The property's clear," she said. "Do you want us to begin the transition? Convert it to corporate housing or put it on the market?" I looked at the house. 12,000 square feet of lies, built on a foundation of cruelty, mortgaged with my grandmother's love and my stolen future. Every room held a memory I wanted to forget. The kitchen where my mother took my savings. The study where my father told me I was worthless. The bedroom where I cried myself to sleep at 14, convinced that if I just tried harder, just painted better, just was more, they would finally see me. "Neither," I said. "Donate it. The county needs a women's shelter. Let it be the one useful thing the Ashford name ever produced." I hung up. I walked down the front steps and across the gravel driveway to the black sedan waiting at the gate. My driver opened the door. I slid inside, and the warmth wrapped around me like a blanket. As the car pulled away, I caught a glimpse of the house in the rearview mirror. The lights were still on. The chandelier was still burning. But the rooms were empty now, and the silence that filled them was not the silence of a home. It was the silence of a monument to people who confused wealth with worth and cruelty with strength. I didn't look back. That night, I didn't lose a family. I survived one. And for the first time in 31 years, the only voice in my head was my own.